Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
And you can check out the website, bjshow.co. You can go directly to our YouTube channel at bjshow.video. All the shows are up. Typically, we get them up between 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, although this morning it won't be up till later, John, and that's sort of a visual or a oral heads up to you that I've got someplace I got to be as soon as I get off the air, so it'll be later this morning, maybe early this afternoon.
I hear you.
Okay, couple things to talk about. First off, the gift that keeps on giving, okay? Are you ready for this, John? I've got some new...
I'm ready for this. Is this another conversation about herpes?
No, I've got some new drops.
Oh.
You ready? Listen closely.
Oh, I'm ready.
Well, make my day, pal.
Did you hear that?
And that is not from a 1980s Charles Bronson movie.
Right.
That is actually Joe Biden.
That was yesterday. Okay, here we go again.
I'll even do it twice.
Now, here's one that I'm going to put into a promo for John's weekly segment. What do you call it again? What's the thing we did yesterday?
Well, it was. We wrapped it up yesterday. Yeah, the Tortured Politicians Department.
And here's I'm going to put this in a promo. You ready?
I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
Okay.
That's just fantastic.
If you saw
By the
this,
way, Brad, I have a new gimmick segment. You heard Scott talk about how he loves the gimmicks that we do. I have a new gimmick that I'm going to tell you about off the air.
Oh, no.
That I think you're going to love. I think it's funny, and it's going to be one of those things that just that gets your goat.
Okay. But first, this one.
Well, make my day, pal.
Okay. You being a dude, me being a dude. Okay. There's certain things that when you're in a contentious situation, and maybe not as much anymore, but if you watch some of the old movies, if you get cut off for a parking place and the guy who cuts you off, you get out of your car and you say to him, "Hey, pal, why did you pull that bogus move on me?" Right? Pal is typically like sort of throwdown terms, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. What's wrong? What's your problem, pal?
Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting about this is that Biden always reverts back to his hardcore Scranton, Pennsylvania, where,
That's right.
Right. Where it's just like, I don't know if I ever told you this story or not. I don't want to embarrass somebody, but there is a guy who runs a radio show, a national radio show, and this guy is very, 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 very rich. And I've told the story a couple times when I was on the BS show with Shelley. And I don't think unless you listen to it, you don't know the story. I will not mention the guy's name, but there's a guy who is on not one, but 2 radio stations here in St. Louis, does a national talk show, okay? And one day, when I'm listening to him, he's very rich, and he does not live in the St. Louis area anymore. He's talking about, he talked about how he's such a tough guy because he grew up in Florissant.
The tough streets of Old Town Florissant. Well, you might get robbed for your fritzes.
Now, here's the interesting thing. He talked about this one time, and I thought to myself, now hold on a minute now. And so he started giving some clues as to when he lived in Florissant. And when he lived in Florissant, it was like possibly the very late 50s or early 60s. Okay, John, you being a North County guy, that predates you. But for those of you who don't know this crazy weird story, there was a guy by the name of Mr. Egan, Mayor Egan in Florissant, who ran Florissant with an iron fist.
Oh, yes, he did.
And Mayor Egan was very proud of the fact that almost every year the city of Florissant came up, was it U.S. News and World Report, came up always on the top 10 safest cities in the country, and a lot of times was in the top 5, and sometimes, I don't think it ever hit number 2, but sometimes was I don't think it ever hit number 1, but it was number 2 on the list, and it used to be a big story in the local news on Channel 5 and Channel 4 and the Post-Dispatch, and back in the day on the Globe's Democrat, Florissant has been voted the 3rd safest city in the country, okay? So what's interesting about this is, I thought to myself, okay, when this guy's talking about how he got his nose broken in Florissant and there's certain streets that he couldn't walk down because of the fact that gang members would beat the hell out of him, I thought to myself, I don't believe this. This is in the golden age of Florissant when it was like to the point where you could put $100 bills on your driveway, and it's 6 o'clock at night, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, they would still be there. Or somebody would come up and say, somebody would come up to your door, sir, these $100 bills were on your front lawn or on your front driveway. I just want to make sure you have them because I wouldn't want the wind to come and blow them away, because they would never be stolen, right? So after hearing him tell this story 2 or 3 times, I called his office one day, and they gave me an email address, and they said, this is his email address. He answers all his emails. So I said, fine. I gave him an email, and I put my phone number in the email. I'll be darned if he didn't call me. And I said to him, I won't give his name. I go, I got a little problem with what you're saying on your show. And he goes, what's that? I go, well, you talk about growing up in the mean streets of Florissant, and I would estimate that by when you said your age in Florissant, and I know close to what your age is now, that you grew up in Florissant when Florissant was like super safe. He couldn't wait to get away from talking about that topic. He's dodging me left and right. And because what he was doing was, he was using on several times saying, Florissant's right next to Ferguson, and everybody knows where Ferguson's at.
Yeah, it's that Ferguson rub.
Once again, back in the day, Ferguson was, John, you're a North County guy? Ferguson was a very nice place, right?
Beautiful. Yeah, and my dad tells stories. My dad grew up in North City. My dad tells stories of when he was a kid and a teenager, they would ride their bikes up to Ferguson and marvel at the huge lawns and think like, wow, this is what it's like to live really nice.
Right. And once again, there's houses in Ferguson that it's like the same thing that's like, what was that gal's name? You told me this one time before. She was head of, her last name was Rice, I think something. She was head of the Better Together committee, and she comes out.
Oh, Nancy Rice.
Nancy Rice. She comes out to a Chamber of Commerce meeting we had, a O'Fallon Chamber of Commerce meeting, and she's saying, well, I drove out here and I made a mistake. I drove down Natural Bridge to pick up I-70, and oh my God, Natural Bridge, I felt like they were going to steal the wheels off my car when I'm on Natural Bridge. I'm going like, okay, have you been on Natural Bridge from 170 east through, what is that area and through there? Normandy, places like that, around Umsel. There are houses back there that if you could pick them up by the foundation and drop them into Webster or Kirkwood, they would be $2 million houses. Not $1 million houses, $2 million houses. Am I kidding, John?
No, you're absolutely right.
And once again, it's to the point where I get so sick and tired of these people dissing North County. Now, I grew up in North County. I told the story, before. I was born at Barnes Hospital, lived not too far from Barnes, well, not real close, but lived down the street from the Chevy plant up until I was about 4 years old. We moved to Jennings, lived in Jennings for several years. Then we moved for a year. I lived on a farm way up in North County, the Coos Farm, Kuhs. And the people who go way back with real estate will know Coos. He was a very rich guy. He owned car dealerships. Had a big real estate magnate. My dad, who was a civil engineer, built our house in unincorporated Spanish Lake. I get so frustrated when I hear these people talk, well, North County's always been where the unwashed have lived and where the people who they figured out that you should be wearing shoes when you go out in public. I hear that stuff and I'm going like, okay, when I went to school, I went to school with lots of kids whose dads worked on the Gemini program. They were aeronautical engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. They were physicists. I knew one of my friends his father was a PhD in physics. And these were friends of mine that I went to high school with. And it's to the point where, like, every time I hear this stuff, oh, North County. And now I will tell you one interesting story. And I'm going to get in trouble for telling this story, okay? My job of 3 years, my younger years, working as a police dispatcher, okay? I have said this many times, and I've had people argue with me over this. People, and mainly people who live places like Webster Groves, Kirkwood, Chesterfield.
By the way, the voice you're using is very weak and gay. Go ahead. I've reported it to Valentine.
Yeah, I was going to say this. Okay. I have said many times, the reason they have a low crime rate is because of the fact that the police and the administrations of these cities cover up the true crime. How do they do it? Well, certain reports just don't get up to the media. There used to be a deal where when the reporters come in and look at the police blotter, there were certain reports that didn't end up on the blotter, if you know what I'm saying, okay?
Yep.
Someone that I know, who I've told this to repeatedly, who always says I'm full of, S blank blank T, called me up the other day and said, I have to tell you, you were right. And this person tells me the story of someone that they know, and I won't mention the city, but most people would go, oh my God, I'd love to live there, about how someone has had repeated problems with a squatter, and a repeated problem with a squatter. And when this person who owns the property that this person squats in, and we're talking about several times the same person comes back and squats in this home, the home is currently not occupied, that when this person who owns the home tries to press charges against this person, the police won't do it because of the fact that they'll say, well, it's a woman, the woman who is the squatter. They'll say, we're just going to drive her out of the city and just let her off somewhere. Because once again, if they write a report on it, that shows up on their crime statistics, and even to the point where the only way this property owner that was told to me about has any redress is if they sue this person civilly. Now, what good's that going to do? Because they're a squatter. They probably have no money. They have no money.
What are you going to get out of it?
What are you going to get out of it? It's going to be and probably chances are they're not going to show up in court. You're going to get default judgment against it, which is like, okay, you just wasted your time, your money, the whole bit. And once again, I remember I had a banker one point in time that lived in Clayton, and she said to me, I live in Clayton. We don't have crime in Clayton. I go, you just don't know about the crime in Clayton. And as a matter of fact, my very first, the guy, I think he's departed from us right now. I don't think he's lives anymore, and I miss him dearly. The guy's name, he did the Sunday night talk show when I first started back in my radio career back in 1973 on KSLQ. His name was Lee Ford. His real name was Lee Lankford, okay? Lee Lankford. And at the time, he was a detective sergeant in Richmond Heights and ultimately became the chief of police in Richmond Heights, and unfortunately got thrown out of the job due to a terrible situation that happened to him where he got essentially drug into a situation that should have never happened, but he lost his job over the thing. He told me that when he was a rookie cop, he was in the Army, and he got out of the Army, he was in for 4 years. He got a rookie cop, so I guess he was 23 and through there, that when he patrolled the streets in Richmond Heights, they knew her. And if you ever watched Bosch, the TV show Bosch?
No, but you've told me all about it a few times.
Okay. Bosch has a term we used to call them known characters. And known characters was a nice way of calling them S-bums.
That's I learned that from you via Bosch.
Right, or S-birds. That's what Bosch would call them.
S-birds, that's what it is.
Yeah, he calls them S-birds all the time. Okay. Lee Lankford told me the story that when he was a rookie cop, the chief had a little meeting with all the guys, and they knew who the S-birds were, and the chief said, here's what you do. If you find them here in Richmond Heights, you arrest them, or no, you don't arrest them. You put them in the back of the squad car, you drive them into the city, you drive them specifically into North City, beat the crap out of them, and say, don't come back! And they didn't.
Yeah. I mean, but you're helping them out because you're taking them to a place that's better resourced to take care of vagrants, right?
Well, the whole point point was, and to this day, I think of these crazy things that happened at the police department I worked on and the goofy thing was I worked the night shift, and this is back in the day when, the officers literally wrote out their reports, by hand, and they would turn them into us to type, and we'd type the reports. And time again, where I worked 4 to midnight, I would type a report. Let's say I worked on a Tuesday night. I would type a report on Tuesday. When I came back in to work on Wednesday night, the same report was in my bin to be retyped. And why was it being retyped? Redactions. There were all the, the lieutenant had gone through, struck this line, bunk, but it was highlighted, no, can't say this, stuff like that, to cleanse the reports, to not make the department and the area that I was a police department, that I worked for police department in, to make it look like we don't have any crime here, nothing happens here, this is all good little people that never cause any problems. Matter of fact, if you drive 36 miles an hour in our town, the speed limit's 35, we don't have anybody who drives more than 37 miles an hour. We never have anybody, no B&Es, no breaking and entering. We don't have any armed robberies. They just don't happen here because we're this peaceful little place that is super nice.
Well, you wouldn't want people to think that you were, I don't know, Florissant. You wouldn't like all the ruffians that hang out at Crest Bowl, and the rival bowling games. By the way, that's a great story about somebody pretending that Florissant was super dangerous back in the day. Completely unrelated. Did I ever tell you that my favorite goaltender for the Blues was a guy named Rick Wamsley?
I remember Rick.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. That's a joke, I think.
I remember
a few folks might get that. Yeah, Rick Wamsley was his name. Yeah, and also, Brad, we know that Florissant was safe because didn't they have the greatest land area dedicated to parks? And isn't that the best indicator of an economic engine and vitality is when you have a lot of parks, Brad?
John, yes, just like that Klondike Park that every time I drive through it, it's me, a maintenance guy, a park ranger, and a woman and her kid. And, once again, how many square miles is Klondike Park? See, God, get me going on this kind of stuff. John,
I know I get you going on, but can't we all agree that that's why, if it wasn't for Bangert Park, Florissant would have never been on the map, Brad?
John, I've got to go out to Washmo today. I just may drive back through on 94. I might do and what's the weather supposed to be? It's supposed to be nice today?
No, we're getting a ton of rain today.
Okay, ton of rain today. Well, I won't go through Klondike Park. Okay, I didn't mention what I was going to talk about here. I got sidetracked. Let's hide this off to tomorrow. Have you heard this story about what Romney said about Biden?
No, and in fact, I'll actively avoid it so that my reaction tomorrow will be real on the air.
Well, here, I'll just tell you the headline. Romney suggests Biden made, quote, enormous error in not pardoning Trump, which I think is a fascinating story.
Wow, that's surprising coming from Mitt Romney.
Well, he's essentially saying that this would turn the narrative around and that Biden would look like the good guy, and essentially Biden, we'll talk about it tomorrow, which I think it's a fascinating angle because you think about things that politicians do to curry favor, to make it look like, oh my God, can you believe he did that? Was that nice or what? So now the story is, lately, if you heard this, the story is that the insiders are telling the story that every single day Joe Biden is fretting over the fact that he's afraid his son Hunter is going to end up in the Gray Bar Hotel. And the story, seriously, they're talking about that they think that Hunter is going to literally get jail time for this gun violation, which I believe comes up at court in Delaware, I believe June 7th, if I'm not mistaken, just, 3 weeks, pretty much 3 weeks from today. And the legal experts are saying he's probably going to get nailed on this one. And once again, the thing that bothers me about this is, even though to the point where I've purchased guns, if we know what we're talking about, there's a question on the test, or the thing when you apply for, the instant background check that essentially asks you, are you a user of marijuana? Are you a user of, are you addicted to illegal drugs? And he said no. So essentially he perjured himself, he lied, and that no on that question, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's like automatic 5 years in jail if you get convicted of that in federal court. So,
and ladies and gentlemen, that is a member of the St. Louis Ham Radio Hall of Fame, Brad Hildebrand. The Ham Radio Hall of Fame. I keep saying Hall of Fame, Brad Hildebrand.
John, do you know what my call letters are?
I'd love to hear it.
K0SLQ.
Ooh, no way. Is that for real?
Yeah, for real. K0SLQ.
Well, I should have known. I should have known you're up on that.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to you tomorrow, John.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?